Put your faith in the light.
Hello guys, welcome to another one of my videos. This is Lightblade, and well, in this one I'm finally making my Season 3 Mythic Plus Retribution guide. So here you'll find all the information you need to get your goals in the world of Mythic dungeons, being that Keystone Master or pushing even higher score. So the contents of this guide will be talents, special crafted gear, trinkets, stat priority, gems and enchantments, sample rotations, and I'll be ending it with some useful macros and WEAKAURAS that I personally use to make my Keystone running a lot more easy. So with that being said, let's start with the guide. Okay guys, let's talk about talents. So for Retribution Paladins, talents are pretty much set in stone for the most part. There's very small variations that you can do, but those variations help you deal with Fortified or Tyrannical. So here I'll give you 4 builds that you can use, 2 of the most standard builds for Tyrannical and Fortified, and then 2 that also deal with Tyrannical and Fortified but are some things that I cooked up myself. So let's start with the first Tyrannical standard build. Okay guys, so this is the standard Tyrannical build. As you can see, from last season to this one, very little has changed. Actually, in the general Paladin tree, nothing has changed. Oh, remember, by the way, all these builds will be down in the description of the video, so you can just copy paste it. Okay, going back to the builds. On the general side, you always have one point that I call the flex point. You can put that thing anywhere you want to deal with affixes, get more utility, get more healing, anything that you want for it. So I'm just gonna leave it here on Unbound Freedom for now, but remember, you have that one point to put whatever you want. Other than that, on the general side, you can see we're still using 3 capstone talents: Vengeful Wrath, Divine Resonance, and Seal of Order. So on the Retribution Paladin side of the things, very little also changed. Instead of using Vanguard's Momentum though, we are going to be swapping that point into either Divine Wrath, or you can also use High Lord Judgments. Both are good options. High Lord Judgment is pretty interesting because it works with our tier set, making so it leaves 2 debuffs on your target, and whenever you use a spender, the spender itself consumes 1 of the debuffs, and then there's another judgment debuff on your target, which gets some extra damage from the tier set proc, you know, the copy of the spender that we get. So High Lord's Judgment is pretty decent, and it competes against Divine Wrath. You can either pick this or that. Just gonna leave it on Divine Wrath for now. Okay, so another thing that you might notice here is that we're using Divine Arbiter. We're not using Searing Light, and we're using the things that empower our Wake of Ashes. So yeah, pretty standard Tyrannical build. This one will yield you the most boss damage, but it will also reduce your AoE by a considerable margin, between 15k to 20k on a given pull, which is a bit of a sacrifice, you know, in AoE, but in Tyrannical weeks it shouldn't be a problem. Okay, now let's go to the Fortified standard build. Okay, so this is the standard Fortified talent build. As you can see on the general side, nothing changes. You still have that little flex point that you can put anywhere you want to deal with affixes or get extra utility or healing. We're still using 3 capstone talents there. On the Retribution side of the Paladin tree, we do have some small changes at the end, but for the most part it's the same. We're still not using Vanguard's Momentum. We are using Divine Wrath, or we can flex it into High Lord Judgment. Both things are pretty much the same. On the lower part though, we are not taking a point in Divine Arbiter. Instead of that, we're taking a point in Searing Light. So this build does pretty good AoE damage, but in turn sacrifices a lot of single target potential. Because remember, Divine Arbiter is not only the Divine Arbiter itself, you know, the damage that it does. It also increases anything that deals Holy Strike damage by 5%. So basically that's almost everything that does single target for us, plus some things that also do AoE, like Judgment and Crusading Strike. So it does sacrifice quite a bit of single target. Around 7 to 9k single target sacrifice to get an extra power in AoE. Okay, now let's go to the 2 builds that I cooked up myself, and one is going to be for Tyrannical and the other one for Fortified. Okay guys, so let's talk about the Fortified version of the build that I've been cooking up for you guys. And well, in the general side of the talent tree, you are going to be making just one change. Instead of taking Vengeful Wrath, you are going to be taking Divine Purpose. This gives you back the proc playstyle, which is really fun to play with because you're just spamming there your Divine Storms or you're spamming your Final Verdicts, which is a lot of fun. On top of that, it gives you a lot of like explosive burst potential if those procs happen while you have your Final Reckoning and Wings, because you're adding buffed up spenders by 10% because of Divine Purpose, on top of just doing more spenders in those cooldown windows, which is really very powerful. Okay, so on the Retribution side of the talent tree, we're still not going to be taking Vanguard's Momentum. I don't recommend taking Divine Wrath with this build because Hydra's Judgment has more value with this build because of Divine Purpose. In the other builds, we take Hydra's Judgment to buff our procs from our tier set, you know, the copy of the Spender procs from our tier set. In this one, the second part of Hydra's Judgment, you know, the second debuff that's left on the target can actually be consumed whenever you get a Divine Purpose proc, giving that already amped by 10% Spender an extra 20% from the Judgment debuff. So yeah, really recommend taking Hydra's Judgment with this build. Okay, the last changes we're going to be making is to the last part of the talent tree here. We're going to be taking Divine Arbiter plus Searing Light while we are going to be sacrificing Seething Flames. Seething Flames, if you read it, it says that Wake of Ashes is going to do reduced damage after its first target, you know, to all secondary targets. And a lot of the dungeons this season, with small exceptions like the Dawn of the Infinite dungeons, have a really high density of mobs. And even those Dawn of the Infinite dungeons also can be made to have high density pulls, you know. So Seething Flames kind of loses a lot of value there because it's making your Wake of Ashes not do uncapped AoE. While if we just don't take Seething Flames, normal Wake of Ashes will always hit everything by the same amount, the same as for the dot. It will always do the same amount of damage to whatever Wake of Ashes hits, so both are uncapped AoE. Okay, Searing Light is just going to give us more AoE potential. This has a 15-second internal cooldown, but the amount of Divine Storms and Radiant damage that we're going to be throwing out, this thing is just going to proc on cooldown. And the last change, like I said, is Divine Arbiter as well as Searing Light. Divine Arbiter is just going to give us that nice balance between single target and AoE, because Divine Arbiter increases everything that is Holy Strike damage by 5%. That's basically everything that does single target for us, plus some things that do AoE like Crusading Strikes and Judgment. So yeah, Divine Arbiter is a pretty decent talent to have, as well as Searing Light. And well, yeah, this is the fortified version of the build. Now, if you want to use the same build on a tyrannical setting, you can still do it, but we are going to be sacrificing Divine Purpose. So the tyrannical version of this build would be the following. Just swap Divine Purpose for Vengeful Wrath, and that's pretty much it. And you can keep using Searing Light and Divine Arbiter both in your builds. And well, guys, let me know down in the comments. Try it out. Tell me if you like these builds. You know, this week is the tyrannical version, so you're not going to be using Divine Purpose, but still, let me know down in the comments below how do you feel using these builds. And well, now let's go to the next part of the guide. Okay guys, let's talk about crafted and special gear. So crafted gear, there is one slot that is set in stone for us, and this is the Frostfire Legwords of Preparation. This thing is just too strong to pass out in tyrannical or fortified setting. It's just a really good embellishment. Gives you around 14% haste whenever you use it on 5 targets, whenever you hit 5 targets, you know, and that's just like a mini lust effect. It's just too strong. Always craft this thing. So our second embellishment has a bit more flexibility. You can either craft a Allied Grisguards of Companionship, which is going to give you around 1.4% versatility in terms of damage, and it's also giving you that half of that in damage reduction. You can craft yourself a Shadow Flame patch that's just giving you damage. At the end of a key, it's going to be around 1.4 to 1.6 of your overall damage. It's pretty decent, you know. That damage is going to be dealt on priority targets, which is sometimes good. And you also have the third option, which is the Unstable Frostfire Belt, which works in similar manner as the Shadow Flame patch. It just does damage, but this one is a dot that comes with extra utility of when your target dies, it just leaves a patch of frost on the ground, which slows things. You know, it can help you to kite, let's say, Spitefuls if those exist, or maybe other mobs in the trash bag. You know, sometimes when your mob dies and this thing was on it, you know, the dot, you lose a bit of value, but still, it's a really good embellishment. It's going to be around 1.4 to 1.6 of your damage at the end of a key. So as you can see there, you have that flexibility on your second embellishment. Now let's go to special gear. Okay, so special gear. So before we start talking about legendary weapon, because I know that's all you guys want to hear, there's a small honorable mention, which is another axe. You know, this one comes from the second part of the Dawn of the Infinite dungeon, so the Murzon's Rise, and it's the Gorhal Might of the Warchief. So this axe has pretty niche uses this season. It has Demon Bane, which means it procs extra damage whenever you are hitting a demon. you know. There are 2 dungeons where this comes in handy. The first one is Dark Heart Ticket, where Xavius and the last packs of trash are demons, so you are going to get this proc. And the second dungeon is Blackroot Hold, where 3 bosses are actual demons. So Ilisana Ravencrest, Smash by the Hateful, and the last boss, the Big Dreadlord, is also a demon. So you're gonna get value in those dungeons. The damage this axe does on those demon bosses is around 4%, so it's not too shabby, you know. So if you get a Gore Hall, use it on Dark Heart Ticket and Blackroot Hold. Now let's talk about the legendary axe. Okay, let's talk about Firalat the Dream Render. So this axe is the legendary that every Retribution Paladin wants to get. It's really strong. It's around a 15% damage increase in terms of weapon item level plus the effects in single target situations. So recently there was a WOWHEAD article that appeared. I'm going to leave it down in the description of the video so you guys can check it out. It tells how the weapon works for Death Knight. So I'm going to use that and assume it works in a similar manner for Retribution Paladins. So the weapon has 2 effects, 1 passive and 1 active. Let's talk about the passive. So your attacks apply Mark of Firalit. We have confirmation from the WOWHEAD article that AoE abilities will apply the mark to more targets. So let's say for Retribution Paladins, that's going to be Divine Storm, Judgment, Crusading Strikes. The mark deals a sizable amount of Shadow Flame damage over 15 seconds. Sadly, the article also says that this damage is not hasted, it cannot crit, which is, I think, a bug. The article also implies that it may be a bug because the weapon itself has critical strike and haste, so the Shadow Flame damage from the dots should be hasted and critted, but maybe it's a bug, maybe they fix it later. For now, it's kind of a bummer that it doesn't do any of those 2 things. Okay, when you activate, Firalit draws in the flame, so it consumes all the marks on your target up to 5, and it will gain a 50% extra damage on the on-use effect. That brings us, let's talk about the on-use. So it has a 2-minute cooldown, and you charge to a target and start swinging repeatedly in front of you. So charge to a target, start doing damage in front of you. For 3 seconds you can't move and you can do anything else. So in a Mythic Plus scenario, that might kill you sometimes, but there are windows where you can use this axe and do that damage. The damage is not uncapped. A lot of people were saying that this 400k damage was going to be uncapped, which is not the case. You know, that would be just too overpowered. It works like almost all other trinkets do. Whenever you hit it, it just splits the damage between the targets and it increases damage up to 5 targets. So yeah, that's pretty much the on-use effect. The weapon, is it strong? Yes, it's really damn strong. It's also pretty expensive. Hopefully they fix the bugs on the passive part and make the Shadow Flame damage actually crit and be hasted, because that would make this weapon really, really powerful instead of just strong, you know. But still, you want to get it as a Retribution Paladin. Hopefully luck is with you and, well, with all of us, and we can get this legendary as fast as we can. And well, now let's go to the next part of the guide. Okay guys, let's talk about trinkets. So the best in slot trinkets for Retribution Paladin, most of them are sadly coming from the raid, and as we all know, the raid is not farmable, so you just gotta get lucky to get some of these. But don't worry, there are still some really good stuff that you can get from the Mythic Plus dungeons themselves until you get the raid stuff. Okay guys, so let's talk about the Augury of the Primal Flame, the trinket that drops from Firak. So this trinket is a 10 out of 10, and it just gives you critical strike, but the effect is really strong. Your spells and abilities have a chance to grant you Annihilating Flame, causing your critical strikes to deal 50% additional damage as fire damage, split between nearby enemies until you reach a cap of damage. So this damage is also increased further by critical strikes. And this trinket works really well in both single target and AoE, because the damage will be increased per enemy up to 5. So really strong trinket. Sadly, it's on the very rare loot table, so you will very rarely see it drop from Firak itself. Most of the time you'll get this thing from your vault. This trinket also recently just got a hotfix, which makes it proc more reliably while they reduce the damage. This was a net gain for it, so don't worry if you see any hotfix note of saying that this got nerfed or anything. It's still a really powerful trinket to get. Okay guys, the next trinket we're going to be talking about comes from Smolderon. It's the Ashes of Ember Soul. This trinket is just incredibly powerful and fits perfectly in Mythic Plus. So it just has haste on it, but the on use gives you a ton of strength for 20 seconds, decaying every 2 seconds, and once the effect ends, you lose all the haste this trinket provides for 1 minute. Okay, yeah, it has some downsides, but the amount of burst damage that this is going to give you is incredibly powerful. You're just going to annihilate anything you face whenever you use this thing. And it also comes with an extra effect that is really good in Mythic Plus. So when circumstances are dire, your soul ignites, granting this bonus again without decaying. So that means whenever you are under 20% health, you have a chance to get this effect again without the negative decay. So you can also get this effect only once per combat. So in raids, this makes this trinket kind of meh, you know, it's good, you know, but you can only get it once per raid boss. While in Mythic Plus scenarios, we can get this like pretty much on cooldown if we play our cards right, you know, and we can also get it pretty organically as the higher and higher you go in push, because there's going to be mobs or enemies that are going to chunk you down to that threshold of health where you can proc this thing. So really good trinket in Mythic Plus. I highly recommend to get it if you can. Okay guys, let's talk about the next trinket, and this is Pip's Emerald Friendship Badge. This trinket is just a very reliable stat stick, you know. It comes with strength as baseline, and it gives you a small amount of mastery, versatility, or critical strike depending on which is your current best friend. So currently I have Pip, so it's going to give me passively 280 mastery. On top of that, it has a proc that's pretty reliable. It has a 36% uptime on a Mythic Plus dungeon setting. It gives you a very high amount of secondary stats that diminish over 12 seconds. So that's also going to be depending on which friend you have. So again, mastery, burst, or critical strike. Really strong trinket. I would give this a 9 out of 10. It's not biz, but it's really powerful. Okay guys, so this is another trinket from the raid, and this one comes from Narlu. This is the branch of the Tormented Ancient. This is just a 2 damage trinket, you know. It gives you strength, and it has an on use on a 2.5 minute cooldown, so it's kind of a wonky on use time, but it's still just fine. Just press it whenever you need some damage and you're going to be fine. When you use it, you summon 4 roots that slow you down up to 60%, and your next 4 melee abilities will destroy a root and deal damage to whatever is close to you, doing split damage on nearby enemies. This trinket works well in single target. It works well in AoE because the damage is increased per enemy struck up to 5. So yeah, this trinket is a 9 out of 10. It's really strong, it's really powerful. It's just one of those just do damage trinkets, you know. I'm giving it a 9 out of 10 because it's not as strong as the other 2 things like Smolderon or the Firak thing, but it's really powerful. So if you can get it, get it. Now let's go to our options from Mythic Plus dungeons. Okay, now let's talk about the trinkets that we can get it for a Mythic Plus if we can't get the things from the raid. So the first one I'm going to be talking about is the crab. Yes, the porcelain crab is just a really reliable trinket. It's just a stat stick, you know. It gives you strength, it gives you a proc of mastery, but it's special because it also gives you a defensive proc in avoidance. So the amount of damage you get from the mastery proc is around 11 to 12% for a Retribution Paladin, and the avoidance is around 5% of extra avoidance damage reduction on AoE abilities, which is pretty valuable because there's a lot of danger stuff that is AoE and Mythic Plus dungeons. So this trinket is a solid 8 out of 10. Okay, the next trinket that we're going to talk about comes from the Galacron part of the Dawn of the Infinite dungeon. So this is the Accelerating Sandglass. This is just another really nice stat stick. This time it gives you haste for about 80% of the dungeon, and then whenever you fill up those haste, you know, you get the 8 stacks, you're going to get a damage proc on your next ability. That damage proc is not incredibly high. You're going to be getting between 1 to 1.5% of your damage overall done by this proc at the end of a key, but remember, you're gaining all that haste all the time. So yes, this trinket is pretty good. It's an 8 out of 10, so if you can get it, get it. It's a pretty decent one. Now let's go to the next one. Okay, the next trinket we're going to be talking about comes from the Dawn of the Infinite dungeon as well, but the second part, the Murason's Rise one, and it's the Mirror of the Fractured Tomorrows. So this trinket is a bit less flexible than other options because it has a 3-minute cooldown, but the effect is pretty strong. So if you're dealing with a really hard pack and you're playing with an organized group and you know where you're gonna use cooldowns, this can be really powerful to just get rid of those annoying like hard trash mobs or hard bosses. Trinket itself has the effect that it gives you their highest secondary stat and a really high amount of that whenever you use it. But just always remember, it's a 3-minute cooldown trinket, so I wouldn't recommend to just use it with your wings all the time. You gotta know where to actually put this trinket in. So that's the only downside. I will give this thing an 8 out of 10 as well. Now let's go to the other trinkets that you can get. So the next one comes from the dungeon Ataldazar, and this is the Razan's Gleaming Eye. So this trinket is another 8 out of 10. It's a pretty decent one, especially on tyrannical weeks. I wouldn't use this on fortified weeks, but for tyrannical, it helps a lot with killing bosses. As you can see, this effect changed a lot since BFA. In BFA, this trinket only gave you haste, but now Blizzard made it so it gives you a damage proc, which is a pretty high one, you know. At the end of the dungeon, it's going to be between 2 to 3% of your damage done to bosses. So it's pretty good and reliable trinket to have. Okay, the last trinket we're going to be talking about comes from Waker's Manor, and this is just a 7 out of 10. It's nothing incredible, it's just a decent stat stick. The Gourd Crested Butcher's Block has strength on it and a reliable proc that has a 30% uptime that just gives me a critical strike. So if you get this trinket and you don't have anything else to use it. It's pretty good. Okay guys, before we finish up the trinket part of our video, I want to give an honorable mention to the Verdant Gladiator's Badge of Ferocity. This trinket is pretty decent. It's a 7 out of 10. It's a pretty reliable, just unused trinket that's always up with your cooldowns because it has a 1-minute cooldown itself. So it's really easy to get. You just get 700 conquest. You can either do the weekly quest to get conquest or maybe do some rated PvP, you know. To upgrade it, you do not need any rating, and it goes up to 476 champion item level. I personally was using this trinket until I reached about level 22-ish keys, until I got some better trinkets, you know. So yeah, if you're starting up Mythic Plus dungeons, just go get those 700 conquest and slap this thing on. It's just a really good and reliable trinket to get. Now let's go to the next part of the guide. Okay guys, so let's talk about stat priority for Retribution Paladins. So just a small disclaimer here, this is going to be different for every one of you guys out there, and it really is different depending on what things you are using. For example, embellishments and trinkets and all those kinds of things. If you are using embellishments and trinkets that just do damage, let's say Razan's Gleaming Eye, a Cataclysmic Signet Brand, or let's say a Shallow Flame Patch that just does damage, your stat priority might nudge you a bit further into getting more versatility in critical strike to increase the damage of those outside sources of damage. But if you are using, for example, things that just give you stats, like for example Pips, Emerald Badge, Crab, or you are using like this embellishment that gives you just versatility, stat priority is going to maybe move other stats that sometimes you don't want, like Mastery, a bit higher, you know. So yeah, always sim for yourself because it's going to depend on what gear you are using. That's my best advice. But here I'm just going to show you a general overview of how stats are for most Retribution Paladins. So first of all, you get strength at the top, so item level is king, main stat is always good. After that, you want to get a really decent amount of haste. This is because all the builds that I showed here are Crusading Strike builds, and those require between 31 to 35% of haste. There is no defined parameter, but that I think is the sweet spot of haste that you want to be getting. After that, depending on whatever you are using, for the most part you want to get some burst and critical strike. And after that, you are going to be getting Mastery. You know, Mastery is going to be the last, but remember, as I said before, Mastery can go up and down depending on what things you are using. But yeah, that would be the general guideline on stat priority on Retribution Paladins. And well guys, with that being said, now let's go to the next part of the guide, gems and enchantments. Okay, so gems and enchantments. First of all, for secondary stat gems and enchantments, this is going to be depending on your personal stat priority. The only thing I can tell you is always get one of the primalist gems, you know, one of the ones that has a primary stat and also a secondary stat. As for the other gems, there's a bunch of different combinations of them. This is really going to depend on what you are using, and the simulation is probably going to tell you which gem is better to get. In my opinion, just get versatility and mastery, or versatility and haste. You know, those are just pretty decent options to get, you know, pretty safe bets. As for your rings, there's also 4 options here. You can get Devotion of Haste, Devotion of Critical Strike, Devotion of Versatility, and Devotion of Mastery. A good safe option is just put on some versatility. You know, versatility, you can't really go wrong with burst. It gives you damage, it gives you damage reduction. It's just pretty decent things that you can put on your rings. But always remember to sim yourself to get to look for those secondary stat enchantments and all those things. Now let's talk about more general enchantments for other pieces of gear. Okay, so here on the right side, I'm gonna leave a list of things that you can go shop in for your enchantments, you know, for your general enchants that give like primary stat and other defensive stats. So first of all, on Clove, you want to get Graceful Avoidance. This just gives you 200 avoidance, just a pretty nice amount of damage mitigation. For your chest, you want to get Waking Stats, which just gives you a nice amount of primary stat. For your wrist, you want to get Devotion of Avoidance, which gives you another 200 avoidance, which will give you a grand total of 5% damage reduction on AoE abilities. And on your belt, you want to get a Shadowed Belt Clasp. This one is a bit pricey. It just gives you a small amount of stamina, you know. So if you do not have the gold, you can skip this one because I think it's going for 16 to 17k gold. So it's quite expensive. For your legs, you can get a Fierce Armor Kit, which gives you a nice amount of primary stat and stamina. For your feet, you want to get Watcher's Loam, which just gives you a small amount of stamina, which is always great for survivability. And for your weapon, you want to get Sophic Devotion, which is just the best enchantment you can get there. It just gives you a proc of primary stat. And well, those are all the enchantments that you are going to be needing for Mythic Plus content. Now let's go to the next part of the guide. The AoE Retribution Paladin rotation is very simple. Just build 4-5 Holy Power, use Wings plus Final Reckoning, then spend. Fill up your Holy Power with Divine Toll and same with Wake of Ashes. After that, keep building and spending. Splatter priority becomes Spam Blade of Justice and Judgment to get tier set empowered procs. And use Hammer of Wrath only if you really need that one Holy Power point. And well, that's pretty much it. For the single target rotation, get 5 Holy Power, use Wings and Final Reckoning, then start spending. Fill your Holy Power with Divine Toll and Wake of Ashes as needed. The spell priority changes a bit here. We want to use Hammer of Wrath as often as possible, same as Judgment to get tier set empowered procs, while keeping Expurgation on our target. After cooldowns run off, just keep building and spending as normal. Okay guys, this is the last part of the guide. Here I'll show you what macros and weak auras I use to get some extra information on my screen and to make the use of some spells, especially utility spells, a lot easier. All of them will be in Google Docs in the description of the video, so you can just copy and paste them. So let's start with the macros. Okay guys, as for macros, I only use in theory just two. One is a combat macro that makes it so whenever I cast my wings, it also drops Final Reckoning on my location. I find it really handy to just have this because most of the time I'm in the middle of everything fighting, so it's just more comfortable to just drop it on myself. Some people have this macro as well, but use it at cursor. I don't really like that because I had some fights where I like put it on the wall or something, and that didn't really work very well, so I prefer to just have it on myself. The other macro I use is basically this one that you can see here on your screen, you know, this mouse over cleanse. This macro works with literally every single utility ability. The only thing you have to do is change the name of the utility ability. So here, this one is for cleanse toxins, but you can also swap it, for example, with this one. This one is basically the same thing. The only thing I did is change the name to Blessing of Sacrifice. This works with all our heals or all our other utility spells like Bop, Lay on Hands, anything that you can put onto another player. This macro is going to do the job done. So as I said at the start of this part, it's going to be down in the description of the video, the macro, and just the place where you can swap the name of the ability so you can make all your other abilities be mouse over. So how do mouse over macros work? They're pretty simple. Just mouse over someone. You can see this dwarf I'm mouse overing, and I'm gonna like give him freedom. And he has freedom. Then I can like mouse over and put cleanse. I'm cleansing him. It also works with portraits, you know. If you have like a group of party here on your left side of your screen, you can target the portrait and you can just cleanse them instantly just by mouse overing their photo, you know. So it's pretty nice to have those mouse over macros to just make using your utility a lot more easy, you know. And well, now let's go to the weak auras. Okay, now let's talk about weak auras. So I use a pretty hefty amount of weak auras. Most of them just remind me about cooldowns and timings and all those things. So these are all the weak auras that I mostly use. On the left side, we have the major cooldown ability weak aura, so it reminds me how much of my cooldown is left on my Divine Toll, Wings, and Final Reckoning. On the left of that, I have a weak aura that is also for Trinkets. This one is exactly for the last Trinket slot here. It reminds me how much cooldown it has. Currently it doesn't work because, well, Razan is not a cooldown trinket, but if I were to use one, it would show me the cooldown of that trinket. Okay, so on the right side of my screen, You can see up there I have like a crusade icon. That one just shows me the duration of my wings that I have left. You know, whenever you pop them, they last 20 seconds, so that thing is just a remind me of the duration. Next to that, you can see a big like interrogation sign. That thing is the Divine Arbiter charge counter, so it tells me how many charges, how many stacks my Divine Arbiter has, and it starts glowing whenever Divine Arbiter is up, so I can use it. Below that, it's a protection weak aura. Don't really worry about that. That's one for Shield of Righteous. I used to tank sometimes, but no, I no longer do it. So it's just there because... Okay, under those there is the duration of my Divine Resonance. So you can see a Divine Toll there, a small Divine Toll. Whenever that thing reaches 5, 10, 15, it's going to throw a Divine Resonance Judgment, so I know whenever that's going to happen. And the right side of that, it's a small Wake Up Ashes that reminds me when the thing is coming off cooldown, so I can just pop it immediately, you know. And under that is an Expurgation. If an Expurgation is on my targets, you can see that blue Blade of Justice. Whenever that thing is up there, I know I can throw a judgment, and my tier 6 is going to proc one of the extra like the Wrathful Sanction, and I'm gonna get the extra damage on my next spenders. So yeah, basically those are the weak auras that I use. Oh, I also use some cosmetic ones, you know, for example, those swords that are next to me. Those are things Blizzard removed whenever Dragonflight launched. I don't know why they did it, but I really like them, so I just used a weak aura to bring them back. For the most part, those are all the weak auras that I use. There is one more that is not showing here, and it's this one that is for kicks. So yeah, you can see here, this one shows me the duration of my kick cooldown and the duration of kick cooldowns of everyone in the group, so I can know who is not pressing the button. And yeah, that's pretty much all the weak auras I use. As I said before, they're gonna be all down in the description of the video if you wanna just copy and paste them. I consider my UI pretty simple, and well, I hope it works for you if you decide to use it. And guys, that's going to be the end of the video. I really hope my guide helps you reach your Mythic Plus goals. And if you enjoy my content, subscribe to the channel and leave a like on the video. Thanks for watching, everyone.